Hello and welcome to today's video, a follow-up to yesterday's where we go over patch 14.12 and how it affected the four major regions in the LOL Esports space. Yesterday we did 14.11 and how frankly it didn't do much at all, and this one's in a similar boat. So 19 champions affected by this patch, very broadly, buff or nerf, determined by Riot. Or adjusted, in which case we had Corki and Aatrox on this patch. And only 4 actually saw more than a 10% change in presence. Some things to get out of the way. 125 games played on patch 11. Technically no LCS games in that group. And on 12, we saw 94 games, none of them being played by the LPL. So just keep that in mind. So the only buffed champion that actually came through and showed up more was Ezreal. 36% to 58%. Ignore the 18. Obviously, that's bad math on my part. It's supposed to be 22%. So 22% significant uptick, right? We a big change. Goes from 1 out of every 3, 2 out of every 5 to over half the games. Almost 3 out of every 5. So that's a big difference. Ezreal's quite commonly picked on 14-12. And then the nerfs, we saw 2 champions technically nerfed, and then 1 end up buffed despite an attempt of a nerf, at least in terms of presence. Skarner, as more players play Skarner, they just get better at him and utilize him more in draft. He went from 87% to literally 99% of presence. That's a change, more than a 10% change, but in the opposite direction that Riot wanted. I'm sure Riot wishes at the time they may have nerfed him a little harder to prevent that from happening. And then the 2 champions that actually were nerfed and it resulted in less presence were Ashe and Twisted Fate. So Ashe had an 83% presence, which is over 4 out of every 5 games, and it dropped to 67, so 2 out of every 3. So that is a bit of a difference. So that's the thing. As AD carry and support, it's obviously flex, but we're seeing it in AD carry more often in this split. And then Twisted Fate went from half of games, 50% to 35, so 1 out of every 2 to about 1 out of every 3 games showing up in draft at all. Keep in mind, this is not just being picked and watching them in game, but whether they're banned or not. I went over it in yesterday's video. In my opinion, there are 4 categories you could say for champions, maybe 5. Banned, which means they are too strong to even be considered by teams to be playable or played into in this current meta, to clearly meta, they're in all the games, they're being picked often, to fringe, maybe it's a 30 to 40% champion, not in the top 10%, but the next 10, to then very fringe pocket picks to just absent altogether. And we see Twisted Fate drop off from maybe being, picked to one of those more off-meta fringe picks. I guess off-meta isn't the right word. They're in the box, but Twisted Fate's not being, picked a crazy amount, right? If you had 5 best of ones, he's being picked in 1 to 2 of them at all, whether it's banned or in-game. In terms of the top 10 most commonly played champions, this is a big deal in terms of, did other things change the meta? Itemization, ruins, Drake changes, anything like that. Did the top 10 champions change? And it really didn't happen. You can wonder why. Would Drake changes happen? Maybe, games go longer when teams don't want Drakes. Who knows? So, patch 11, Rumble, Corki, Skarner, Tristana, Ashe, Leona, Nautilus, K'Sante, Senna, LeBlanc. No junglers. The jungle meta is, at least on 14, 11, and 12, pretty good spot. We see Sejuani show up on 12 in the top 10, but otherwise not many junglers being keyed in on, which means that junglers are playing a lot of different stuff, and that makes it more interesting. 3 top laners, 3 mid laners, 2 AD carries, 2 supports. Leona and Nautilus go hand in hand as a handshake more often than not, as I've seen over the years. So to see one, you'll see the other. Senna, of course, being a common pick still. And then on 14-12, not much changes. Only 2 new champions are in and 2 are out. So it goes Rumble, Skarner, Tristana, Corki. So the same 4. Then Leona, Zeri, new to the top 10. Nautilus, Senna, Ashe, Sejuani. So Zeri and Sejuani are in. Quesante and LeBlanc are out of the top 10. That means 380 carries are up here now. And Zeri, Senna, Ash, and Zeri is the most played. Most presence, whether it's banned or picked. Leapfrogging the other 280 carries, which is, I would say, a big change. But what I say is, like earlier in the split and even in, spring, we'd see 4 champions maybe change in the top 10. I would say that's a big deal. That's a pretty big deal. But only 2, 4 out of 19 champions, you tried to adjust and change and things like that, and to see change at this level. Just something to keep in mind, not all the buffs and nerfs are for pro play. Many are for solo queue, but we like to look at this because I could care less about solo queue experience, as it's, could be a farce. Very often. So, did this patch change a lot? No, I would say not. Back-to-back patches, we'll see what 14-13 does as EWC is going on. I haven't decided whether I'm going to utilize those stats or not, as the players are literally sightseeing. And then, LPL is playing on 13, so I could use that. LCS, I think, played on 13 last week. So, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, like it. Subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content. Follow me on Twitter. Join the Discord. Become a YouTube supporter. And hope to see you again tomorrow.